At 19, she was forced to marry a millionaire cowboy, but his wedding gift silenced the whole town. She was only 19 when her life changed in a way she never imagined. Until then, her world had been small and familiar. She lived in a quiet town where dusty roads stretched between modest houses, where everyone knew each other's names, habits, and secrets. Life was not easy, but it was predictable. She helped her mother at home, took small jobs when she could, and dreamed quietly about a future that felt far away. She wanted to study, to stand on her own feet one day, and to choose her own path. But dreams often lose their voice when reality speaks too loudly. Her family had been struggling for years. Her father's income was never steady, and debts slowly piled up like shadows that refused to leave. Every month brought new worries. Bills went unpaid. Relatives began to whisper. Neighbors pretended not to notice but always did. In that town, hardship was never private. It was discussed in shops, judged at gatherings, and turned into gossip by sunset. She felt the pressure even when no one spoke directly to her. Then the proposal came. He was known as a millionaire cowboy, a man who owned vast land, cattle, and businesses that reached far beyond the town. People spoke his name with respect and fear. Some admired him for rising from nothing. Others resented him for having everything. He was older, quiet, and rarely seen in social gatherings. When word spread that he wanted to marry her, the town reacted before she even had time to think. Some called it luck. Some called it fate. Some called it a blessing sent by heaven. No one asked what she felt. Her parents were shocked at first, then relieved. The proposal meant security, respect, and an escape from financial ruin. Conversations happened behind closed doors, voices low but urgent. She heard her name again and again, mixed with words like future, stability, and honor. When she tried to speak, her words sounded weak even to her own ears. She was reminded of everything her family had endured and everything this marriage could fix. The decision was made quickly, as if speed could silence doubt. She felt like time betrayed her. Days moved too fast. The wedding was planned before she could understand what was happening. Dresses were chosen, dates fixed, invitations sent. Every step felt unreal, like watching someone else's life from far away. Friends congratulated her with forced smiles. Some were jealous, others pitying. None truly understood the weight sitting in her chest. At night she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, asking herself how a life could change without permission. She wasn't angry, she was numb. She told herself that many girls before her had married young, had accepted lives they did not choose. She tried to be strong, but fear crept in quietly. What kind of man would he be? Would he control her, ignore her, expect gratitude instead of understanding? She had met him only a few times. He spoke little, watched more. His eyes carried something heavy, something unreadable. He was polite but distant. He never promised love. He never pretended this marriage was about romance. That honesty scared her more than sweet lies would have. As the wedding day approached, the town grew louder. People discussed her dress, the guest list, the wealth involved. Some said she was lucky beyond measure. Others said she had sold her youth. She walked through markets and streets feeling exposed, like her life was no longer her own. Every look felt like judgment. Every smile felt like a question. On the morning of the wedding, she sat quietly as women dressed her up. Her reflection in the mirror looked unfamiliar. The girl staring back wore fine clothes and heavy expectations. Her hands trembled slightly, though she tried to hide it. Her mother adjusted her veil with careful hands, eyes filled with emotion she couldn't name, relief, guilt, hope, all mixed together. No one asked if she was ready. When she arrived at the venue, the town had gathered in full force. This was not just a wedding, it was an event. The wealthy cowboy's presence alone made it unforgettable. People whispered as she stepped out, her heart pounding so loudly she thought others could hear it. Music played, but it sounded distant, like noise underwater. She walked forward slowly, each step heavier than the last. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her, measuring her worth, her fortune, her future. She felt small despite the attention. She wasn't walking toward love or excitement. She was walking toward an unknown life she hadn't chosen. When she stood beside him, she noticed how calm he was. Not cold, not cruel, just steady. He didn't smile much, but he didn't look away either. There was no false warmth in his expression, only seriousness. It made her uneasy and strangely safe at the same time. The vows were spoken. Words about commitment and partnership filled the air, though she barely processed them. Her voice shook when it was her turn, but she spoke clearly. Somewhere deep inside, a quiet part of her promised herself that no matter what happened, she would not disappear completely. As the ceremony ended, applause broke out. People smiled, clapped, and celebrated as if something beautiful had just begun. But inside her, it felt like an ending to youth, freedom, and the life she had imagined. The reception that followed was filled with food, laughter, and conversations she barely heard. She sat beside her husband, surrounded by people who suddenly treated her with respect they had never shown before. The change was sharp and confusing. The same town that once pitied her now admired her, yet she felt lonelier than ever. As the day came to a close, she realized something important. The marriage might have been forced by circumstances, but how she lived within it was still unknown. She didn't know if happiness awaited her or if this was the beginning of a long struggle. All she knew was that her life had crossed a line that could never be undone. That night, as the town slept and celebrations faded, she sat quietly in her new reality, holding onto one thought. This was only the beginning, and the truth of this marriage had not yet revealed itself. The days after the wedding felt strange and unfamiliar to her, like waking up in someone else's life. She moved into his large house on the edge of town, surrounded by open land and quiet skies. It was nothing like the small home she grew up in. Everything felt bigger, the rooms, the silence, even her thoughts. She expected rules, orders, or cold distance. She prepared herself for the worst, because fear had already taught her how to survive disappointment. But what she met was something she did not expect. He did not tell her what to wear. He did not question where she went. He did not demand anything from her. On the first morning, he simply greeted her calmly and asked if she had slept well. His voice was low and steady, not harsh. He went about his day as usual, leaving her space, almost too much space. That confused her more than control ever could. She spent her early days walking through the house slowly, touching furniture, looking out windows, trying to understand where she belonged. Servants were polite but distant. They treated her with respect, yet she felt like a guest rather than a wife. Meals were quiet. Sometimes they ate together, sometimes apart. When they did sit at the same table, conversation was simple and careful. He never asked her to pretend. He never acted as if love already existed. She noticed how early he woke up every morning. Before sunrise, he was already dressed, heading out to work. He checked on cattle, spoke with workers, and managed his land himself instead of giving orders from comfort. His hands were rough, marked by years of labor. This surprised her. She had imagined someone who lived only in wealth and ease. Instead, she saw a man shaped by effort and routine. One evening, she finally asked him why he worked so hard when he already had everything. He paused before answering, as if choosing the right words mattered to him. He told her he did not always have this life. He spoke of long years filled with struggle, loss, and loneliness. He mentioned failures but did not dwell on them. He did not try to gain sympathy. He simply shared facts quietly. That night, she realized something important. He did not see her as a prize or a solution. He saw her as someone sharing a space in his life, nothing more and nothing less. This did not bring comfort right away, but it brought clarity. Still, the emotional distance between them was real. He respected her boundaries, but he did not know how to cross them. She, too, was unsure. She had entered this marriage without choice, and trust does not grow quickly in such soil. They were two strangers living under one roof, both unsure how to begin. Outside the house, the town never stopped watching. Whenever she went into town, people stared. Some smiled too much. Others avoided eye contact. Old friends acted differently, unsure how to speak to her now. Shopkeepers treated her with sudden kindness. She felt the weight of change everywhere she went. She was no longer just herself. She was now the millionaire cowboy's wife. Whispers followed her through streets and markets. People assumed she lived in comfort and happiness. Some believed she had married for wealth. Others believed she was controlled and unhappy. None of them asked. None of them knew the truth. She learned quickly that being admired could feel just as lonely as being judged. Her family visited often. They were grateful, relieved, and proud. Their problems had eased, their status improved. They spoke of opportunities and future plans. She listened quietly, forcing smiles when needed. She did not blame them. She understood why they accepted the marriage. But sometimes, late at night, she wondered if anyone had truly seen her fear. At home, her husband noticed her silence. He did not push her to talk, but he paid attention. He noticed when she skipped meals, when she stayed in her room too long, when her eyes looked tired. One evening, he told her gently that she was free to continue her education if she wished. The words caught her off guard. She had expected limits, not support. She asked him why he cared. He answered honestly. He said he knew what it felt like to lose choices early in life. He said he did not want to be another person who took something from her. His voice did not shake, but his eyes held something heavy. In that moment, she saw not power, but restraint. Slowly, she began to feel less afraid. They started talking more about books, about daily routines, about small things. He listened carefully, never interrupting. When she spoke about her dreams, he did not dismiss them. He did not promise miracles, but he promised not to stand in her way. Yet the town continued its story. Rumors grew louder. Some said she lived like a queen. Others said she was unhappy and trapped. Every look reminded her that people had already decided who she was. She felt the pressure to behave perfectly, to prove something she never chose to represent. Her husband saw this too. He noticed how the town treated her differently, how people judged her without knowing her. He never spoke publicly about it, but something changed in him. His silence became thoughtful, focused. It was as if he was planning something quietly, waiting for the right moment. At night, when the house grew still, she would sit alone and think about her life. She had not chosen this path, but she was walking it anyway. The fear she once felt had not disappeared, but it had softened into caution. She began to understand that this marriage was not a cage, but it was not freedom either. It was a space she had to learn how to live in. She did not love him, not yet, but she no longer feared him. And somewhere between shared meals, quiet conversations, and unspoken understanding, she felt the first shift inside herself. This life, forced upon her, was slowly revealing layers she never expected. And she sensed that something significant was coming, something that would change not only how the town saw her, but how she saw herself. The truth of this marriage was still unfolding, and it was far from simple. As weeks passed, life outside the house became harder than life inside it. Inside, she had space, calm, and quiet understanding. Outside, the town slowly tightened around her like a circle that would not open. Every visit reminded her that people were watching, measuring, and judging her life as if it belonged to them. When she walked through the market, conversations paused. When she passed by old neighbors, smiles appeared too late or not at all. Some people greeted her warmly, but their kindness felt careful, almost forced. Others looked at her with curiosity mixed with doubt. She realized that no matter what she did, people had already decided who she was. To many, she was the girl who escaped poverty by marrying wealth. To others, she was a young woman who had been pushed into a life she could not control. Both stories were incomplete, but neither allowed her to simply be herself. Old friendships began to fade. Girls she once laughed with now kept distance. Some felt uncomfortable, some felt jealous, some did not know how to talk to her anymore. When she reached out, conversations felt shallow and awkward. She returned home many days feeling heavier than before, wondering how a change meant to bring safety had instead taken away connection. Her family remained grateful and hopeful. They spoke proudly of her new life, telling relatives how well she was treated. She listened quietly, nodding when needed. She did not want to hurt them by speaking the truth. She knew their relief came from years of worry and fear. Still, there were moments when she wished someone would ask how she truly felt. At home, she tried to build routines. She read books, helped with small tasks, and slowly planned her future education. These moments gave her comfort, but the town's judgment followed her everywhere, like a shadow she could not escape. Rumors grew louder with time. Some people said she lived in luxury and looked down on others now. Others said she was quiet because she was unhappy. Every action she took was misunderstood. If she dressed simply, people said it was an act. If she dressed well, they said wealth had changed her. She learned that silence can be twisted by those who do not want to listen. Her husband noticed the change in her. He saw how she returned from town more withdrawn. He noticed how she avoided public places when possible. He never forced her to explain, but his concern was clear. One evening, he asked gently if the town had been unkind to her. She hesitated, then spoke honestly. She told him about the looks, the whispers, and how small she felt under everyone's eyes. She told him how tiring it was to be judged every day. He listened without interrupting, his expression calm but serious. When she finished, he said something that stayed with her. He said people often fear what they do not understand, and they judge what they cannot control. He told her that the town had always judged him too, long before she entered his life. Some called him cold, some called him heartless, some believed wealth made him superior. He said he learned long ago that trying to please everyone only brings emptiness. But this time was different. This time, someone he cared about was being hurt. The town had never truly seen him either. They saw his land, his money, and his silence. They never saw the years of effort, the mistakes, the losses. They never saw the man behind the image. And now they were doing the same to her. Days passed, and she noticed a change in him. He became more thoughtful, more focused. He spent time reviewing documents, making calls, and visiting places he had not visited in years. He did not explain, but she sensed intention behind his actions. Meanwhile, the town continued its judgment. At a local gathering, she overheard people speaking about her without realizing she was nearby. Their words were sharp and careless. They spoke as if her life were a story meant for their entertainment. She left quietly, her hands shaking, her heart heavy. That night she cried for the first time since the wedding, not out of fear but out of exhaustion. She was tired of being strong, tired of being silent, tired of being misunderstood. Her husband found her sitting alone. He did not ask questions. He sat nearby, giving her space, letting her cry without shame. After a long silence, he told her she did not have to face the town alone. He said some truths deserved to be shown, not explained. She did not know what he meant, but she felt a strange sense of comfort. In the days that followed, the town buzzed with new rumors. People heard that the Millionaire Cowboy was planning something. Some said it was a business move. Others said it was a celebration. Everyone speculated. No one knew the truth. She noticed workers coming and going more often. Meetings were held quietly. Invitations were sent out to town leaders, families, and elders. Curiosity grew stronger than judgment. Still, she felt unsure. Part of her feared more attention. Another part hoped that something might finally change. During this time, she reflected deeply on her own growth. The girl who once felt powerless was slowly learning resilience. She was still young, still unsure, but she was no longer invisible to herself. She realized that even when life forces decisions upon you, how you respond still matters. She also began to understand her husband more clearly. His quiet nature was not distance, it was protection. He observed more than he spoke. He acted only when necessary. He did not fight rumors with words. He waited. And now he was ready. On the evening before the town gathering, she asked him directly what he planned to do. He looked at her and said he was not trying to prove anything. He simply wanted to remind people that dignity does not come from wealth, and respect should never be based on assumptions. That night, she slept with mixed emotions, fear, curiosity, and a small sense of hope. The next day would bring something new, something the town was not prepared for. And for the first time since the wedding, she felt that her silence might finally be heard, not through words but through truth. The day of the town gathering arrived quietly, without celebration or noise. From early morning, people began to talk. Curiosity filled the streets. No one truly knew why they had been invited, only that the millionaire cowboy himself had asked everyone to come. That alone was enough to pull the whole town together. She woke up with a heavy feeling in her chest. Part of her wanted to stay inside, far away from eyes and whispers. Another part knew this day mattered. She dressed simply, choosing comfort over appearance. She did not want to impress anyone. She just wanted to breathe. Her husband noticed her nervousness. He did not rush her or give long speeches. He only told her that whatever happened today, she did not need to speak unless she wanted to. He said the truth did not always need many words. Sometimes, actions spoke louder. When they arrived at the gathering place, the crowd was already large. Families stood together, elders whispered among themselves, and younger people looked around with curiosity. The air felt tense, as if everyone was waiting for something important, though no one could explain what it was. People noticed her immediately. Some nodded politely. Some stared openly. She felt the familiar weight of attention but stood still, reminding herself that she had done nothing wrong. This was her life, not a story for others to control. Her husband stepped forward calmly. The crowd slowly grew quiet. Many expected him to speak about business, land, or wealth. Some expected a celebration. Others expected nothing more than another reminder of his power. Instead, he began by speaking about the town itself. He talked about its history, its struggles, and the people who built it with hard work and hope. He spoke slowly, clearly, without pride. He reminded them that this town had survived difficult times because people once stood together instead of judging one another. Then his words shifted. He spoke about dignity, about how easily people forget that behind every story is a human being. He spoke about how silence is often mistaken for weakness, and how wealth is often mistaken for character. The crowd listened closely now. Then he revealed the reason for the gathering. He announced that instead of a personal wedding gift, he had chosen something different, something meant for the town. He spoke about families struggling with long-standing debts, about young people unable to continue their education, about elders who had worked their whole lives and were now forgotten. One by one, he explained what he had done quietly over the past weeks. Debts were cleared not as charity but as a chance to start again. Education funds were created not as control but as opportunity. Support was offered not as pride but as responsibility. The crowd grew silent. People looked at one another, unsure how to react. Some were shocked. Some were emotional. Some lowered their heads in shame. No one spoke. Then he explained why. He said he understood judgment because he had lived with it his whole life. He said he understood silence because it was how he survived when words failed him. He said he understood being misunderstood because wealth hides pain rather than erasing it. And then, without raising his voice, he spoke about her. He did not describe her as lucky or saved. He did not present her as a symbol. He simply said she was young, brave, and deserving of respect like anyone else. He said no one had the right to decide her story for her. That was the moment everything changed. The town did not clap. No one cheered. They simply stood still, absorbing the weight of his words. Some eyes filled with tears, others filled with regret. She stood quietly beside him, her heart racing. She did not expect this. She did not expect him to speak for her without taking her voice. He did not describe her pain. He protected her dignity. For the first time since the wedding, the town did not look at her with judgment. They looked at her with understanding. People slowly began to react. An elderly man stepped forward, thanking him quietly. A mother wiped her eyes. A group of young people exchanged hopeful looks. No one spoke loudly. This was not a moment for noise. The gathering ended without celebration. People left slowly, deep in thought. The town felt different, as if something heavy had been lifted from it. As she walked back to the car, she felt lightheaded. Not because everything was suddenly perfect, but because for once she was not carrying the weight alone. On the drive home, neither of them spoke. Words felt unnecessary. The silence was calm, not heavy. That evening she sat by the window, watching the sky darken. She thought about how quickly life could change, not because of control or power, but because of intention. The town would talk again. She knew that, but the tone had changed. The stories would change, and more importantly, how she saw herself had changed too. She was no longer just someone's wife. She was not a symbol of wealth or sacrifice. She was a person whose life mattered, and the town had finally been forced to listen. What came next would shape her future, not as someone judged by others, but as someone ready to choose her own path. This was not the end of her struggle, but it was the beginning of her voice. After the town gathering, life did not suddenly become perfect. Problems do not disappear in one day, and people do not change overnight. But something important had shifted. The air in the town felt lighter, as if a long-held breath had finally been released. In the days that followed, people behaved differently around her. Some greeted her with genuine warmth. Others spoke softly, carefully choosing their words. A few avoided her out of embarrassment. She noticed it all, but it no longer hurt the same way. The sharp edge of judgment had softened. For the first time since her marriage, she felt seen. She began going into town again, not to prove anything, but because she wanted to. She walked through the market without lowering her eyes. She spoke calmly, confidently. When people smiled, she returned it without fear. When some stayed silent, she let them. She understood now that not every silence meant rejection. Her family noticed the change in her too. During visits, they saw her standing straighter, speaking with clarity. Her mother watched her with quiet pride, finally sensing the strength her daughter had grown into. There were moments of shared understanding, moments where no explanations were needed. At home, her relationship with her husband continued to evolve. They were still learning each other. There were no sudden promises or dramatic confessions. Instead, there was steady respect. They spoke more openly now about expectations, about fears, about the future. He encouraged her plans for education, helped her look for opportunities, and reminded her often that her life was her own. One evening, she asked him why he had chosen to do everything so quietly, without seeking praise. He smiled slightly and said that real change does not need an audience. He said that if kindness is done for attention, it loses its meaning. She understood him better than ever. She also began to understand herself. She enrolled in courses, taking small but firm steps toward her dreams. Studying again filled her with energy and purpose. Learning gave her confidence. Every new skill felt like a piece of herself returning. She was no longer waiting for life to happen to her. She was shaping it. The town watched this transformation with interest. Some admired her courage. Some felt inspired. Young girls began to look at her differently, not as someone who was saved by wealth, but as someone who stood strong within her circumstances. She never gave speeches. She never tried to become an example. She simply lived honestly. There were still days when doubt returned. Some nights, she wondered what her life might have been if things had gone differently. Those thoughts came quietly and left quietly. She no longer allowed regret to control her present. Her marriage also found a new balance. They shared laughter now, small and unexpected. They shared silence that felt comfortable, not empty. Trust grew slowly, naturally. Love did not arrive like a sudden storm. It arrived like steady rain, patient and gentle. They respected each other's pace. Neither felt trapped. Neither felt owed. The town continued to heal in its own way. The support he had offered changed lives. Young people returned to school. Families found stability. Elders felt remembered. Gratitude replaced envy in many hearts, and the whispers that once followed her faded into background noise. One afternoon, as she sat reading by the window, she realized something important. At 19, her life had been decided by others, but she had not been broken by it. Instead, she had grown stronger through silence, patience, and resilience. She did not need the town's approval anymore. She had found her own voice. That evening, she stood outside watching the sunset over the land. The sky was calm, painted with soft colors. Her husband stood beside her, not too close, not too far, just enough. She smiled, not because life was perfect, but because it was hers. The girl who once felt powerless had become a woman who understood her worth. The marriage that began as a forced decision had turned into a partnership built on respect, and the town that once judged her had learned a quiet lesson it would never forget. Sometimes, the strongest voices are the ones that rise after silence.